All right, so unfortunately, before we start today's show, both myself and Jaden would like to pay our respects to Chadwick Boseman, who unfortunately passed away last week. Chadwick battled colon cancer for 4 years while starring in many films that we love, including some of our favorite MCU films. We lost a legend this week, and may he rest in peace. And obviously, our thoughts are with his family at this time.
That's incredible that he went through so many films. He made so many films in those 4 years, and I don't think anyone even knew about it.
I know it's a real, like, it shows he was a hero on screen and off screen.
Yeah,
Incredible.
yeah,
So yeah, obviously thinking of him and his family
yeah.
at this time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Rewatch podcast. My name is Samuel.
And I'm Jaden.
This is a podcast where we rewatch classic or current films weekly and then decide whether they deserve a rewatch from you. This week, we rewatched, or
We
you watched,
watched.
Tenet.
Yes.
Before we get into it though, a like on this video would be most appreciated from our lovely viewers.
Mhm.
You can subscribe if you would like. If you're listening on Spotify, you can find us by searching on YouTube, The Rewatch.
Yep.
All right, so obviously we did a video previously, like a non-spoiler talk before you actually saw the movie, and I sort of gave my general thoughts.
Yep.
Do you want to give your sort of general thoughts? Like what was, first off, like, how did you feel coming out of the cinema after watching this movie?
When I came out of this film, I wasn't like 100% confused, but there was quite a lot of things that I didn't understand, and
Yeah.
like I really wanted to, get home and watch all the explanation videos on it. And I was searching up on my phone, all the sort of explanations on the ending and what happened in the film. So I was quite confused, but that's obviously expected from a Nolan film. Um, but definitely coming out of it, I thought it was an incredible film. I think it's the best one I've watched so far of 2020, which I think you said as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, I definitely feel like I empathize with you who came out of the theater confused the first time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously, story overview for this movie, to decrease the plot into a couple sentences, which is very difficult.
Yeah.
This is a massive movie. So, armed with one word, Tenet, and fighting for the survival of the entire world, a protagonist journeys through a twilight world of international espionage on a mission that will unfold in something beyond real time.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, written and directed by one of my favorite directors now, Christopher Nolan.
Yep.
So, obviously, you've seen the Batman films of his.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any other of his work? Interstellar, Inception, anything like that?
I did watch Inception, but this was when I was quite young. Um, I did watch Inception about 10 minutes in, and then I kind of thought to myself, this is really confusing. I don't want to sit through this. And obviously, I didn't really quite understand Christopher Nolan's sort of filmmaking at that time. So I really want to go back and watch that again. And maybe in the future, if we do a podcast on it, that will probably be the time to rewatch it.
Yeah, I think this movie makes Inception look simple. Because my gosh, this movie, in those first 10, 30 minutes, you're just confused as
Yeah.
hell. But anyway, let's get into the characters. So we have John David Washington as the protagonist. We never find out his name.
Yeah.
It's not really relevant. He's the protagonist of the mission. He's the main guy. John David Washington the son of Denzel Washington. Did you know?
Really?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah, me neither. I found that out like the other day. I'm like,
Oh
oh,
wow.
Denzel's kid.
Yeah. Wow.
So obviously, some of his acting talent has rubbed off on his son
Yeah.
because he's great in this, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's because obviously like Denzel Washington, he's in all sorts of movies, but um, probably famously in like sort of those action movies. So
Yeah.
similar to this in a respect.
Yeah.
So his son sort of carrying on, you know,
His
I don't know,
legacy.
his work
Yeah.
almost, yeah. But obviously, Denzel's still starring in many sort of, critically acclaimed
Yeah.
things, but yeah, not doing like the action-packed sort of stuff anymore because his son's doing it. His son's probably taking his job.
Yeah.
Robert Pattinson is in this film. He plays Neil,
Yep.
my favorite character in the movie.
I'd say so as well. Yeah.
Really enjoyed him, but I am biased because like obviously he's going to be Batman,
Hmm.
and everyone's sort of getting ready for him to his career to sort of take off, and
He's
it sort of
killing it at
now
the
has.
moment. He's doing
Yeah,
so well. Yeah.
it's real like redemption story almost after Twilight, but
Yeah.
he's going to become one of the top actors of our time, I think.
Yeah.
The way he's going, like the trajectory, sort of similar to Christian Bale almost,
Yeah.
um, taking on the Batman, and that's just gonna, make him beyond famous.
That's gonna like boost his career tenfold. I
Yeah,
mean, the
but
Twilight
I think
film.
this will as well. Like, what
Yeah.
a awesome sort of comeback movie because he's been doing a lot of indie projects since Twilight. But this is sort of his first big film back.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed Neil. We'll sort of talk more about him as we go through the plot, but yeah, he was my favorite character by far.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Debicki is Kat, so the bad guy's wife.
Hmm.
I enjoyed her performance.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Okay, like you said before, in the non-spoiler discussion, how you kind of said that Elizabeth Debicki was the sort of emotional aspect of this film. She kind of carried it all. And
Yeah,
I do think that's very accurate. I mean, a lot of the other characters are so sort of tough on the outside. They don't really display any sort of emotion until the very end, which we'll get into. But I do think that Kat's sort of performance in this film was very grounded. Yeah, I did like her character quite a lot.
yeah, she definitely brings like the emotion, the heart to the film.
Yeah.
I do have like a bit of negative things in terms of like because she's always looking out for her son,
Okay.
and I feel like that can sort of that negatively because I mean we're dealing with the fate of the world here, and
Yeah.
all she sort of seems to care about is her son.
Yeah.
Um, but like obviously it's understandable because she's a mother, and obviously her first priority is her son's safety.
Yeah.
But like lady, if you want to save your son, like your son is part of the entire world. If the entire
Yeah.
world dies, your son's going to go too.
Yeah.
So how about focus on saving
I think it
the
kind of
entire world?
overrules it. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's sort of like sort of a negative that I found with her character. Not necessarily like Elizabeth Debicki's performance, but that was sort of towards the end where everything's ramping up, and she's like, "I need to save my son," and like,
Yeah.
yeah, and the entire world too, please, like.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, but we'll sort of get into more of the details of the plot later on. Kenneth Branagh, is that how you say it? Is it
Kenneth, I
Branagh?
think it's Kenneth Branagh or
Branagh?
Kenneth Branagh. One of them.
Okay. So he plays Andrei Sator, who's the bad guy. What were your thoughts?
Um, well, I think Kenneth Branagh is an American actor, so hearing him kind of display a Russian sort of accent was very new to me.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but I think he was a really good villain. And yeah, the sort of role that he played as well was very fitting. I mean, he didn't really have much of an introduction, so when he was first introduced, I was like, "Who's this guy?" And obviously, I didn't really hear the dialogue too well because they're very quiet in this film. That's one thing that
Yeah,
It's quite
yeah.
weird, you know. It's
Major negative.
you definitely need to listen in, otherwise you're gonna miss a bunch of stuff. Um, so when he first came up, I was like, you know, who the hell is this guy? But I do think that, you know, his whole sort of story, like, I mean, he's gonna end the world. You can't get much bigger than that, you know, in terms of a villain's plot. Um, I do think it was quite different and unique. I mean, I don't think I've seen a villain that's, you know, he's dying, so he's threatening to end the world as well. I don't think I've seen that before.
Yeah, omnicidal is the word, I think. Like,
Oh yeah.
you want to kill yourself and take everyone with you.
Oh
Um, but yeah, so that's a word that has been discovered recently because of this character. But yeah, I think this movie could have easily failed if Kenneth Branagh's performance um, was bad, or
yeah,
or the villain wasn't well done. Obviously, we see it with many superhero sort of films today. If they don't nail the villain, it's rubbish, and if they
yeah,
do nail the villain, like in such like The Dark Knight, then it becomes legendary. You know,
yeah,
Infinity War nailed the villain, and the film was that much better. You know,
yeah,
so I feel like credit, credit to Kenneth Branagh, because without him, the movie wouldn't have worked. I
yeah.
mean, you can
It
see
wouldn't have
other
been a good
actors,
film. Mm.
like you can imagine like a Jared Leto, or like just a younger, more sort of extravagant actor trying to play this role. You know, it could have easily tanked the entire film, but obviously the casting has saved it here, because
Yeah,
I think Kenneth was great.
yeah,
All right, so obviously we did that spoiler-free video, which the viewers can check out on our YouTube channel, which goes for about 25 minutes of just talking about the general spoiler-free thoughts on
yeah,
the movie. Did you have like any pros and cons you wanted to touch on briefly before we sort of dive straight into the plot?
yeah.
And oh my gosh,
Go on.
it's just like, the plot is massive in this movie. So once we take that dive, we're not coming out. So
Yeah, yeah. We'll get
so
through all
so what are
this other
your
stuff
spoiler-free
before.
thoughts for people who haven't seen the movie,
Spoiler
who are,
free.
yeah, listening to this, and then we'll tell them to get stuffed after we finished.
Okay. Well, I think I've already kind of touched on the villain's plot, which is a big spoiler. So
Yeah, fair enough. But
I think if you're listening to the podcast, it's kind of a given that you
yeah,
expect the
yeah.
spoilers. So we should probably just give a warning here. This podcast is going to contain spoilers, so if you would like to watch a spoiler free, pop over to the YouTube, and we did upload a 25-minute video of a spoiler free discussion.
Yep. So just to recap those, so pros for me: action, acting, cinematography, music, and story.
Hmm. Yep.
And cons: audio mix, lots of dialogue, complicated plot. And so what I mean by that: audio mix, the music is so loud.
Yeah.
This is a negative that lots of other people are sharing. The music is really, really loud, and the dialogue is really, really quiet.
Yeah.
And Christopher Nolan, I think he might have just adjusted the audio mix a bit too much,
Yeah.
in the sense that the music's too loud.
Yeah.
Like, this is a loud movie, but the dialogue is just so quiet, and you really need that dialogue.
That's one thing that Christopher Nolan does a lot in his films is he makes the amazing score so loud that you can't actually hear what the actors are saying, and
Mm,
that's, in a way, you want to listen to the music, but you also want to know what's going on. So
exactly.
yeah,
You want to have the best of both worlds,
you got to balance
and
it right.
the music is fantastic at sort of elevating the action scenes and
Yeah,
everything like that. Like in that first sequence, as soon as the music comes in, oh, like I'm ready to go.
yeah,
Like, it was so good. But like, they were saying things and you just had no idea.
yeah,
Especially in the first time watching the movie. Like, I was lost already. Like, but the music was so good. I was like, oh, this is awesome.
yeah,
I just can't hear what they're saying. I don't know what's going on.
mm,
So yeah, and then leading into that, like, obviously the plot is very complicated,
yeah,
and that's sort of the main negative coming out of, the critic reviews and the media.
yeah,
They're saying like, oh, you need to watch this movie 6 or 7 times, and the rebuttal to that is, no, you don't, because you have not seen this movie 6 or 7 times. So don't pretend like you need to watch it that many times. Like, it's confusing, yeah, but when I watched it the second time, I got absolutely everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Or everything that's like important. I'm sure there's things that I still missed and that I can watch it again and still pick up new things.
Mm-hmm.
But like there'd be subtle things. Like I followed the main plot. So yes, it's a complicated plot and people are going to get lost along the way.
Mm.
But on a second time watching, you'll pick up everything. Anyone can do that,
Yeah.
So I don't know. It sort of makes me angry that journalists are saying that even the cast. Like I saw a headline that said, even the cast don't know what this movie's about, and that was completely false once you click on the article and everything. So you don't need to watch this movie 6 or 7 times to figure out what's going on. You know what's going on in the first watch.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you want to like pick up everything, probably at least 2.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. I mean, I've seen it twice. I'm not going to go see it again. I'll get the Blu-ray when it comes out, but
I definitely need to watch it again to pick up on all the little dialogue pieces that I missed out on and kind of understand all of the sort of things that were meant to be understood that I might have missed out on. I need to go back and watch it again to pick up on everything that I want to pick up on.
yeah. But it's just as good the second time, in my opinion. That's how I found it anyway. All right, let's take a deep dive into spoilers now. If you don't want to have anything spoiled for you, you want to go see Tenet, click off goodbye. Check out our spoiler-free video on our YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
But for all of the cool kids who have seen Tenet, we're going to dive in right now. We're going to go from the start to the end. God knows how long it's going to go for. We're in for the long haul here.
Yeah.
We're going to max it out at an hour and a half. That's our limit.
Yep.
But we're just going to go through and we're going to digest this movie because I love this movie. And I think you do too.
Yeah.
You feel similar. Yeah. So let's just take it all in. So let's start with the title itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tenet.
Yeah.
Or Tenet or Tenet, or doesn't matter. So, in terms of the actual name, Tenet is a word. You did look that up, right?
Yeah.
Some like sort of philosophical meaning.
Yeah.
But a Reddit user said their theory is that it's 10 both forwards and backwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a palindrome or whatever it's called. Like,
yeah. Yep.
So, and that not only is a representation of the entire movie because the entire movie is a palindrome.
Yeah. Yeah.
They go forwards and then they go backwards.
Yeah.
But there's a middle point that's the same constantly. They're either going towards it or back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 10 both forwards and backwards, and obviously in the final sequence they have 10 minutes to sort of do their thing in the final and before the end of the world. So 10 both forwards and backwards, Tenet.
Yeah.
Also, there's this thing called the Sator square that has risen from
Sator. Yeah.
Yeah, Sator square. For the YouTube viewers, I will put a photo of the square up now so you can sort of see what we're going to talk about because it's quite complex. Like Spotify listeners, just try to stay with us.
Yeah.
But, okay, so there's 5 words and they're all below each other.
Mm-hmm.
First word is Sator, and that's the villain of this movie, Andrei Sator. Under that is Arepo. That's the word, and that's the artist who painted the forged Goyas, so those paintings that came in to play in the first sort of half an hour of the movie. Under that, so the third word, we have Tenet, so that's obviously the name of the organization. And then under that, we have opera, and that's the first sequence of the movie. And under that, we have Rotas, which is apparently the name of the security company who are guarding the Freeport warehouses, so where the art is being held.
Mm-hmm.
So all those words on top of each other, if you then look at it sort of like a crossword, if you look down, it's the same words as it is horizontally.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So obviously that because then to fit all of those together in the middle, you have to have Tenet. If
Mm-hmm.
you take Tenet out, it doesn't work. Um, so yeah, because the name Tenet would obviously hint to Sator. Obviously, the mission is to stop Sator. It's to use the Goyas to get Sator's trust.
Yeah.
It's to then obviously the first part, but everything starts in the opera sequence,
Mm-hmm.
and then Rotas, so the people who guard the Freeport warehouses,
Yeah.
are also quite important, obviously.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Tenet, you're gone at this stage.
Just going back to the Sator Square or the Sator Square, so it the words appear if you read them horizontally, if you read them vertically, and if you read them backwards as well. It's also the same words.
Oh yeah, backwards as well.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm just seeing if it's diagonal. I don't think it's diagonal.
No, not diagonal.
No.
But it's pretty epic. I
Yeah.
mean, this was, I think, an employee, so like someone who worked on the movie got sent like a gift, and it was this.
Yeah.
So until we get clarification from Christopher Nolan, we don't know whether this is actually real or somebody just put this together. But they would have been a pretty smart person.
Yeah.
And also like the Tenet with both 10 backwards and forwards, I think is pretty good as well.
Yeah.
I think that could most possibly be the meaning for the title. But obviously, Tenet is the name of the organization that will be founded in the future by the protagonist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is it's just crazy. I mean, if our heads don't hurt by the end of this podcast, I'm going to be very surprised. All right, so let's take that deep dive. Let's go. Let's start from the very beginning, the opening scene in the opera. How did you feel in that scene? What were your thoughts?
Going into this, Christopher Nolan's work in, setting up a film is always done incredibly. And this really reminded me of the bank robbery scene in The Dark Knight where,
Oh, okay.
the villains sort of storm in and they've got the sort of low sort of tone music across.
Mm,
And there's
yeah,
the sense of danger as well. But the opera scene, I think it was, done great. It's such a big scene to start off with. There's so many people. There's, you know, bullets going everywhere. It's just such a big action scene to start with, which you're sitting there and you're already invested in the film.
mm.
I just thought it was great.
Yeah. So what's actually going on here? I'm pretty sure. So the device, the technology, part of the algorithm that will end the world. There's a part of it in the opera house on one of these officials,
Mm-hmm.
and the Russian people, so like Sator's army essentially, are trying to steal it.
Yep.
And then David Washington's character, so the protagonist, he's not part of the Russian people. He's like a separate thing because you know how they put the badge on
Yeah.
and they sort of
Yeah.
they pretend to be the
They
Russian
blend in.
peeps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then they pretend to be the security essentially, and they go in and steal the algorithm or whatever, and they lose it along the way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where we first see Neil,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of the red string on his backpack.
Mm.
So we see the first reverse bullet, and we're like, "Oh God, who's that?" And then
Yeah.
he turns around, and we see the red string. So we're thinking, "Oh, I got to look out for that for the rest of the movie."
Yeah, but you don't know that at the start of the film. You don't know who it is because obviously
Yeah,
you haven't really been introduced to Neil, and you don't know that Neil has the orange strap thing on his shoulder or backpack or whatever. So when you're at the end of the film, you only then realize,
yeah,
hold
good
up,
payoff.
that was him at the start of the film coming back to save
That's
David Washington's character, the protagonist, so he could create tenets, so they could end the world.
so mind bending.
Yeah.
So what has Neil actually done in that instance? He came back in time to save the protagonist, did he?
Yeah, so Neil so the protagonist when the film finished, he set up Tenet in the future, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then I think he recruited
Yeah, he recruited
a
Neil.
young Neil. And he must have gone through however old Neil is, those 20, 25 years, knowing
Yeah.
that he was going to die to save the
Mm.
world. So he went through that whole time, knowing that. And then I think he must have gone back in the past, to obviously, save the world. And then, so Neil went back in the past to
Yeah.
save the protagonist, so the protagonist could hire him. So it's kind of like a loop that goes both ways. If the protagonist hadn't saved him, then the Neil couldn't save the protagonist,
Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
wouldn't have
I
happened. Yeah,
So there's like 25 different Neils in this movie. Like Neil is such a badass. He's just like flipping around all over the place. He's inverted. He's time traveling.
yeah,
He's everywhere. He's sort of, the movie could have been about him very easily.
yeah.
But no, I like the way that it went. I really love Neil's character, and I
Yeah.
think in that first instance. So, do you think he's actually trying to get the algorithm himself, and then he stumbles upon David Washington's character, and that's how they meet the
No,
protagonist and Neil? Or do you think
no.
he's just trying to help the protagonist without
I think he.
telling
I
him?
think he was trying to. I think he was definitely trying to save him, because in the
Yeah,
scene where they're, I think they were sitting down to meet someone, and he asked for a drink. Do you remember that
yeah,
scene?
yeah,
And then he said a Diet Coke for
yeah,
David Washington's character, the
mm,
protagonist. He clearly knew that he
yeah. He
doesn't
knows
drink on
him.
the job, so
Yeah,
he must have come back from the past to save
mm,
him to save the future.
yeah, yeah. So he must have been saved there, or yeah, Neil was sort of helping him out.
Yeah, all the events that
Um,
he did were to save David Washington's
yeah,
character so
fair
he could
enough.
hire
Yeah,
him. Yeah.
I love Neil so much, man. What an awesome character. I love Robert Pattinson. So quickly going from there, the protagonist sort of runs into a bit of trouble, ends up being caught by the Russians.
Yeah.
Um, and then we get the train scene,
Hmm.
which is by far the most violent scene in the
It's
movie.
brutal. Yeah.
This movie, like, isn't actually that violent. And many Christopher Nolan movies aren't that. Like, obviously, there's lots of shooting and there is death around, but like we don't actually see it and there's no blood or anything like that.
Yeah.
But in this train scene, obviously the protagonist is getting his teeth ripped out. Um, we do see a bit of blood there, so it's by far the most violent scene in the entire movie.
Mm.
We have a war sequence later on, no blood or no, limbs flying off or anything like
Yeah.
that. It's just go through, shoot guys. We don't see it. If people die, it's off camera.
Yeah.
So it's not very violent. That's what some people don't like about this film. They don't like, because the violence sort of adds a sense of realism.
Hmm.
But to be honest, when I was watching it, I didn't really,
I didn't
I
even
don't,
notice. Like, I didn't really care, to be honest. I was so
yeah,
invested in the action.
I don't need to see someone's head explode and someone's leg go flying 50 meters in order
Yeah.
to be invested in the action and that sense of danger.
We did see
Um,
a guy get stuck in a wall at the end sequence.
oh yeah, we
Yeah.
did, yeah, yeah. But that's so like not violent. Like he just got stuck
Yeah.
in a wall, didn't he? Like you
Yeah.
don't even hear him. You don't hear him like scream or anything like that. It's very quick, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh dear, he's in the wall now.
Yeah.
Poor guy. But yeah, so the train scene is by far like the most violent, the most grounded, the most sort of gritty scene because his teeth are being ripped out, he's being tortured,
Yeah.
and then he tries to take the suicide pill, which he thinks is going to kill him, and then it doesn't.
Yeah.
And he's introduced to Tenet. So his organization that he founded in the future that he doesn't know
That's
about
so
yet.
crazy.
It's mind blown. So after that, he travels to Mumbai because he has to find an arms dealer to lead him to the plutonium, which he lost in the opera sequence.
Yeah.
That's when he meets Robert Pattinson, so Neil's character. Neil obviously knows who he is already. He's just going along with it.
Yeah.
Um, and then, they go to the facility. They find out the bullets go backwards. What did you think of the fact that, how it was explained and that whole scene of him being like, whoa, they go backwards now, like
Yeah.
inversion technology.
It was a bit confusing. Like I didn't really understand it a whole lot, and I kind of had to, sit through the whole film, kind of, interpreting it myself and trying to figure it out. But I do understand how they tried to, involve entropy in it and kind of explain that, you have to drop it first for it to be, picked back up. So kind of like a cause and effect. You can't do something in reverse if it hasn't been done
Mm,
in inverse first, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to imagine that you've dropped it and then it comes back.
Yeah.
So you don't actually have to drop it first.
Oh.
Or do you? Because, for instance, like when they're shooting the bullets, right?
Yeah.
He didn't shoot the bullets. They just came back into his gun. So he's not like doing things and then reversing it. He's just doing things in reverse. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that
See,
makes
this is like a
sense.
mind just, oh my God. Because, like, they don't go out on the battlefield and like shoot bullets and they're like, oh, that one might become handy. I'm going to shoot one there.
Yeah.
And then later on, I'm going to come back and reverse it in.
Yeah.
It just reverses in.
Yeah.
So, like, there's no sort of cause for the effect, which I found really weird. It's sort of like they have to force, how
Yeah.
they sort of, lift the gun towards him and he catches it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, so he has the force essentially. This is Christopher Nolan's take on the Star Wars universe,
Yeah.
essentially. So obviously, like the inversion technology is from the future,
Mm-hmm.
because in the future they can do anything. So they've learned how to invert objects to put an object itself back through time, not like turn back time itself, just like put an object, like reverse it.
Yeah.
So like I thought it was cool. I again, like throughout the first time I was watching it, I was still like, wait, how does this work again? But then we do get that line from the scientist who's explaining it to the protagonist. She says, "Don't try to understand it."
Yeah.
And so as the audience, we just have to go, okay,
Yeah,
we'll go along with you, Nolan. It's okay.
when she says that, you kind of assume that she's talking
Yeah,
to the audience. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, okay, whatever. We'll just go with it.
I'll trust you.
Then quickly we get a cut to England, where the protagonist meets Michael Caine.
Yeah. I think Michael Caine is he in every single one of
I think he
Christopher
is.
Nolan's films?
I think he is. I mean, obviously he's Alfred in the Batman movies. He's in Inception as Leonardo's father. And he must be in Interstellar somewhere too. But yeah, I think he's in all Nolan films.
Yeah. Oh,
But
Nolan
yes.
regards him as his good luck charm.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Fair enough. That would be nice. He gets constant work, doesn't he?
Yeah.
In very big,
And I
big
like how
productions.
his character in this film was also called Michael.
Oh, yeah, Sir Michael. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the protagonist goes to Sir Michael because he needs to find out more about, what is a tenet. And, the protagonist is in the dark at this stage. All he knows is that bullets go backwards. He finds out that, Andrei Astor might have some information on this.
Yeah.
He's like a Soviet arms dealer. He needs to find out where the bullets are from. So that leads him to Sir Michael, who then leads him to Mumbai, or maybe he's already been to Mumbai. No, he has already been to Mumbai, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's come back to England. So Michael was like, okay, you need to get close to Andrei Sator, and you can do that by finding this forgery, this famous painting, holding it over Cat's head, and then gaining the trust of Sator to sort of negotiate and find out what he's doing.
Mm.
So confusing, but so essentially Michael Caine tells him where the painting is, and where Kat is. So then the protagonist then meets Kat. Kat says, "Oh, the painting was a fake, and my husband's holding it over my head." Because obviously Kat's like I don't know what the word is, but like an artist,
Yeah.
sort of like she can identify whether a piece of art is real or not.
Yeah.
And obviously, like she's failed here, and her husband's holding it over her head because it was $9 million.
Mm-hmm.
So she made a $9 million mistake, and her husband's like, obviously, imagine. I think the husband could like crush her monetarily with that,
Yeah.
if she ever left, because he could just sue her, and then she would have no money. I think that's the hold over her, because Kat says like he has control of me,
Yeah, he's got
and
something over her. Yeah.
yeah, and it's the painting. So Kat's obviously failed in her job as an artist, critiquer essentially,
Yeah.
and her husband's holding it over his head. The protagonist goes, "Okay, how about I steal the painting, the forged painting, from wherever it's held?"
Mm.
Kat says, "Oh, it's in a free port, in an airport." So protagonist is like, "Oh, sweet." Meanwhile, we then get this kitchen fight scene where Sator's men try to beat up the protagonist for no particular reason apart from the fact that he was hanging out with Sator's wife.
Yeah.
And we get that awesome scene where he like throws plates into people's
Oh,
faces
and he
and
has
everything
the
like that.
cheese grater to the guy's
Yeah,
head. Oh, that was brutal, man.
yeah. Yeah, but again, like no blood or anything like that. It was just like,
Yeah, but you still feel it though, like,
oh yeah. I
oh,
was still like, oh, in the cinema, everyone was like, oh,
yeah,
there was like a big oof.
yeah,
No, I love that. Like when he was coming through the kitchen, and he just had this rhythm to him where like it's just like this brutal fight style,
yeah,
where it's like slamming plates into people's faces, and it was just being a badass. So I really enjoyed that scene.
yeah,
I think the action's really good, isn't it?
yeah, it's so good.
So yeah, so then the protagonist goes to the airport to steal the painting, and like this is an awesome scene. Um, Obviously, Pattinson is along for the ride, because he's enlisting Neil's help. So the two of them go to steal the painting, and they also crash a plane into the airport.
Yeah,
Um,
so I think that was just a distraction to make it seem, um, what was it, like a terror? No.
yeah, well, it's like they had to steal the painting, so they wanted to
Take the
be
attention off
alone.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they wanted to be alone in the air facility, the
Yeah,
condensed air facility,
but
to sort of,
it was
yeah,
also kind of disguising it. I think it was disguising it as a um as
as a
a
terrorist
no, it
attack.
was as an accident because they took out all of the gold, so it wasn't a terrorist
Yeah.
attack. That's what it
Oh
was, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
on the paper, I think we saw on the paper somewhere that it came up as a news story or something. So he
Yeah.
must
Yeah.
have known. Then he's like, "Oh yeah, so I need to do this in order to kind of disguise this and save Kat as we put her through these sort of time machine looking things."
Yeah. I think the mission was to actually destroy the painting, not like actually to like retrieve it. Because I don't imagine like retrieving it would be very useful. Because obviously it's a fake. So
Yeah,
if they destroy it, there's no way of it being held over Cat's head. Um, but yeah, they're doing all of this. So they crashed an entire plane into the airport
yeah,
to essentially gain Cat's trust,
yeah,
and then gain an invitation to chat with Andrei Sator. So this is big level stuff, considering it's just to gain someone's trust. Like
yeah,
they're crashing an entire plane into the side of an airport
yeah.
to have the invitation to speak to someone. Pretty crazy.
Hmm.
Um, did you know the plane crash is actually real? Like that's a real plane, and they crashed it, like
No
for real.
way.
because the special effects needed to generate that scene would have cost more than
The
the actual
absolute crack.
plane.
Wow.
Yeah, so they have an actual plane
That's
they
insane.
bought, and then they actually crashed it into that building.
I mean,
Obviously, like,
I don't put it past Nolan though. I mean,
oh, what a
we've
genius!
seen him do this sort of stuff before, and he's just obsessed with practical effects, which got
It's
on him
crazy.
because practical looks so much better than CGI. Um, and we see him do this in The Dark Knight as well, where the massive hauler truck kind of flips over as it explodes. That was all
Mm,
practical as well, and they
yeah,
achieved that with a man actually in the truck at the time, which I don't know how on earth they did that, but wow. So yeah, obviously, it's still incredible, but I definitely don't put it past Nolan to do this sort of thing in his films.
yeah. So an actual plane, and they actually crashed it into
That's
a
insane,
building.
yeah.
It's brilliant. I can't wait to get the Blu-ray of this so that I can watch all the special features and the making of Tenet documentaries and
Yeah.
the behind the scenes footage and also like the director commentary. Like I can't wait to watch this movie with Christopher Nolan talking over it
Yeah, because we haven't seen
because
that. We haven't really seen, Nolan's sort of, you know, depiction and his breakdown of what Tenet is. We've only really
exactly.
seen, Reddit users, and we ourselves have to figure out, what does this mean?
Yeah, like when I watched this movie, when I was a bit confused, sure, but I don't want to go to like IGN to tell me, how the ending works.
Yeah,
Like, how does IGN know? Like, did Christopher Nolan tell them?
they've got
Like,
like the
they have no
insider
idea.
joke.
They have no more idea than us.
Yeah,
So, like, no thanks, IGN. Like, don't tell me how the ending, like, don't explain how the ending works.
yeah,
I want Christopher Nolan to tell me, the maker of this movie. Like, you have
yeah,
no idea. You're just guessing. Like, so yeah, that was for my opinion when I saw a couple of those, sort of Tenant explained videos going around. Like, we're all guessing at this stage.
mm,
Like, Nolan hasn't come out and gone through the entire movie and said, "Oh, so this is why this is happening, and this is important because it eventually leads to this and everything like that."
yeah.
So I can't wait to watch the director commentary of this. I've never felt that way about a movie before. Like, I've never wanted to watch a director commentary.
Neither.
Like, I don't want to watch somebody talking over the movie.
Yeah,
Like, I just want to watch the movie. But in this instance, like, I feel like it would be such a cool experience to have Nolan, who's this man who has this massive vision. He's obviously a creative man, creative genius,
yeah,
um, and have him sort of explain what's going on. Because I'll take it from Nolan. I don't want to take it from IGN. um, but yeah, so that I think the airport scene was phenomenal and it looked phenomenal because it was real. And wow, like the fact that that's real is just crazy.
yeah.
The money on this movie,
Well,
the
yeah.
budget of this movie.
I wonder what the budget was. I think it was 250 million. I think.
Yeah, so like superhero movies do a lot more than that. Wow,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I think
Um,
Endgame was like 1 billion, wasn't it? Or am I tripping?
oh, it was something crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, crazy. Then we get the hallway fight. So at the start of the movie, we don't really know what's going on. They find the inversion machine, and we're like, okay, this is how you invert bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Because you put a bullet in the machine, it twirls it round, it sends it out the other side, and now it's inverted,
Yeah.
and it moves backwards through time. They find the machine, and suddenly somebody pops out of the machine, or two people pop out of the machine on either side.
Yeah.
So obviously Patterson's on one side, Washington's on the other side. Two people pop out, one's inverted, one's not, and then they have a fight. And I enjoyed the fight. What did you think? Some people didn't like it because they thought it was a bit confusing.
I think it was done incredibly, and I mean, I don't know how on earth they would have achieved it because they have someone in reverse and someone
Yeah,
moving forward interacting. I couldn't even imagine how they achieved that in camera. Like,
yeah. Like, how did somebody like do those crazy flips that they were doing that
Yeah,
could only be possible in
yeah.
reverse, and then the other person's not in
And I mean,
reverse.
it,
Like
it
what?
doesn't look like they're, someone's playing an actor who's, going in reverse, doing a backflip to make it look
Oh,
like
it
it's
looks
reverse.
real.
It actually looks like the footage has been inverted the other
Reversed.
way,
Mm,
which I don't know how on earth they did it.
crazy, mind blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, can't wait to see like the behind the scenes
Yeah, but
because it's just beyond me.
watching it for the first time, I see I think it was who was it? It was the protagonist. He was like no, the person in the black armor, right? He was
Yeah.
moving backwards to the protagonist and he was like shuffling across the floor. When I first watched it, I was like, what on earth? Like, what
Yeah.
is this? Like,
It looks so
yeah,
weird. You go, what on earth are you doing,
I was
mate?
like, what is going
You're
on
just
here?
like on the ground having a spasm and moving backwards. It's so weird.
Yeah. But in terms of, the sort of I would call it a reveal. We later do figure out when
I love that.
um
Well, let's talk about like in the first part of the movie,
yeah,
we see Patterson run after the guy who's not inverted.
and you don't really
So there's
see
two
that, yeah.
guys, yeah, and then you see he turns a corner. Patterson's still on, like we can still see Patterson. We
Yeah,
can't see the masked man.
yeah,
Patterson takes his mask off. He sort of looks at the guy for a couple seconds and then throws the mask back to him and runs away.
yeah,
And then so we're like, in when I was first watching it, I just didn't pick up on it at all. I was like, oh, he just killed him.
yeah,
Like he just took his mask off or something, and now he's dying. He took care of him, or
yeah,
he knocked him out or something. Whereas then, towards the end of the film, we find out that the masked man is actually the protagonist going back in
yeah,
time.
which is crazy, mind blowing.
Crazy. Oh, I love that.
And I didn't really figure that out, but my friend Millsy, shout out to him. He
Yeah.
actually, I think he called it about 15 minutes
Oh, did he
prior
call
to
it?
it. Yeah, he figured it out, and then I kind of had a moment there as well. And I was like, oh shit, that is what happened, or that's what's going to happen. Like
Yeah.
crazy stuff. Like I didn't see it coming at all, and then it hit me like a train. I was like, oh moly, this is a good
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, like as soon as they were like, "Oh, we need to go back to the plane scene, like the airport,"
Yeah,
and I saw the plane and they were running towards it, and then then I was sort of like, "Oh, I think they're gonna fight themselves." Like I heard somebody behind me on my second time watching it, thinking like, "Oh, they're gonna fight themselves." I'm like, "Yeah, that time you figured it out."
yeah,
But but like in terms of the first time, I didn't know until like he inverted and then he was back.
yeah.
Like it was crazy.
And I'm only
So
just
yeah,
figuring out, so when Robert Pattinson took off the other guy's mask, right? Do you know
yeah,
why he threw it back to him?
because he saw the protagonist, right?
Yeah, but do you know why he threw the mask back to him?
Well, because he needs the mask to.
Yeah, so you can't breathe in the inverted version of your world. You have to have a
Mm,
mask on.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so if he
but
didn't,
he's not inverted though. He's not inverted though.
yeah, but no. Oh yeah, true. He must
So
have
I think he
thought,
was just covering because he took off the mask because obviously the protagonist has just uninverted himself
yeah, true, yeah.
in that instance. So, but before then he was inverted, so he had the mask on.
Yeah, you can't
But
breathe in the inverted, yeah.
yeah, so then when he does go back to normal, so he uninverts, he doesn't need the mask, but he's just covering his face. And
Yeah,
obviously the other protagonist, if the other protagonist saw the future protagonist,
that's
like,
what it would have been, yeah.
he was still sort of figuring out what the whole thing
Yeah,
was. And if suddenly himself turned up, he'd be like, whoa, like what is going on?
yeah,
And it would affect his future.
yeah.
It's crazy. But yeah, so I think Robert Pattinson sort of threw his mask back because he's like, bro, you need to hide yourself.
Yeah,
And
he kind
then,
of figured it out from there, he already knew
yeah,
what was going on, and we do hear somewhere in the film, I think it might have been the lady no, it wasn't the lady, who was it? I can't remember who it was, but someone said if you interact with, uh, another
oh,
version of
yourself,
yourself,
you'll explode.
you cause
Yeah,
annihilation.
Yeah, it
So,
was one of the army ladies.
and kind of, I was kind of wondering, is it when the particles collide? Because we do see the protagonist fighting the protagonist, right? So what
Mm,
constitutes, particles colliding? And apparently, the suit he was wearing
mm,
actually prevents particles
yeah,
from touching
yeah.
one
So
another.
when that lady says like, if you touch yourself, you will annihilate
Yeah.
yourself. She's handing him the suit, which he was wearing then. So she's handing him the black suit and saying, "You're going to need to wear this because if you come into contact with yourself, you'll you'll be annihilated."
Yeah.
Whereas like, this is a bit later on in the movie, and he's like, "Oh, I don't have time for that." But like, obviously, later on when he is going back, he wears the suit,
Mm.
so he's fine. But like, if he was to take the suit off and touch himself, like, instant annihilation.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, I sort of wanted to see that. Like, wanted to see somebody, accidentally touch their past self and like see what happens there.
Explode.
Like, yeah, do they explode or they just like disappear instantly, or
Yeah.
do they do like a Thanos sort of like fade away, sort
Yeah.
of turn to dust thing? Or, like, I have no idea. But I think that's just a cool unknown.
Mm.
Really, some movies don't have to explain everything.
Yeah.
Um, we don't have to know how the force works. We don't have to know what it's like in the future. We don't have to see the future. We don't have to see the future scientist, or we don't have to see the world end. In like an alternate reality.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to see what happens when time is stopped.
Yeah. It's kind of like
Um,
the the grandfather theory or whatever. How
the
if you go back in
paradox.
paradox, if you go back in
Yeah.
time and kill your grandpa, does that prevent you from being born? And if so, if you're not born, you can't really go back in time and kill your grandfather. So it's kind of like
Mm, crazy.
it's kind of mind blowing in a way.
Yeah, the whole movie is like it does it so well
Yeah.
considering how complicated it is, but it is so complicated that people are going to get lost along the way and throw their hands up, as we've already seen. Some reviewers just like probably didn't make it through that first 30 minutes without giving it a, a non-biased rating.
Yeah.
Like they probably gave the rating. They're like, "Oh, this is a bad movie," in that first 30 minutes because they're like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on, therefore it's a bad movie."
Yeah.
You know, I'm supposed to know what's going on, and I don't.
They
So
didn't give it a
therefore,
chance, which is what I
yeah,
do a lot.
yeah,
And I'm glad I
um,
did give it a chance. Or I did. I had to give it a chance because I was sitting in a theater. I
you're stuck
paid
there.
for it.
Yeah, Nolan had you tied down. He's like, "You're not going anywhere now.
Yeah.
You got to sit and listen, boy."
I've only walked out of a movie theater once, and that was for an absolute terrible film. So
Yeah, I didn't walk out of the film, The Last Jedi, so I'm embarrassed of that I didn't do that. I should have. All right, sort of. I can't really remember where we're up to in the plot now. So
the hallway
they've,
fight. Oh no, wait.
yeah.
That
So
kind of
with the
reminded
first
me.
hallway fight,
Yeah, so the hallway fight that reminded me a lot of and obviously I've seen this on YouTube. I haven't watched the film. The Inception hallway scene. Where it's kind of
yeah, yeah,
turning, which
it is
I
similar.
think the Inception one was done like a hell of a lot more incredibly because obviously watching that it's like how on earth did they make these
Yeah,
characters interact with an environment that was turning?
hmm,
It's insane. But
yeah,
either way, this Tenet fight scene in the hallway was also incredible.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Both scenes, because obviously in Inception, like they're floating,
Yeah.
and then the actual hallway is actually
Yeah.
spinning, and it's like, how do you film that?
Yeah.
And then, but then obviously in Tenet, you have people going in
Yeah.
reverse,
He just
interacting with people not going in.
he keeps pushing the boundaries, Nolan. He just keeps doing stuff that other filmmakers aren't doing, which is just great. This is what I want to see in film.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a privilege to be alive during the same time as Christopher Nolan putting out movies like this.
Definitely. Yeah.
He worked on this movie for like 20 years.
Yeah.
This is like his passion
I did
project.
hear that. Yeah.
It sort of makes me sad because I'm like, well, surely he's working on other things too. Like he's such a creative genius. He's probably got so many ideas. But like, if this is his big thing, then like I understand that, and
Yeah.
I'm also a bit sad too because I'm like, oh,
You
we
want to
want
see more
more.
stuff from him.
Yeah. But we will. I think it's only a matter of time. Give it another 10 years and we'll have another massive movie from Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think this is one of his best. But that's an argument to be had later on, I guess.
Yeah.
So back to like the first hallway fight scene, because obviously we come back to it later in the movie.
Hmm.
They get out of the fight. The protagonist then meets the bad guy, sort of finds out what his motivations are. So essentially, Sator, so the bad guy, he's dying from cancer
Yep.
and he's turned omnicidal, believing that if he is to die, then all humanity should also die. Um, and so he's been given 9 objects by the future. And obviously, these objects put together are capable of inverting the entire world.
Yeah.
But these 9 objects are sort of, it's like the Infinity Stones. It's like they're scattered everywhere, and you got to go find them and put them together.
Yeah.
Geez, it is very like Infinity War, actually.
Yeah.
You got to put them all together, and then you can end the entire world,
Yeah.
right? And why does he want to end the entire world? Well, because he's, a bit selfish.
I think it was
If he can't,
explained if he couldn't have it, no one could.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He has this very like egotistical, insane ideal that if he can't have something, then no one can have it.
Yeah.
Which we see in his wife. If he can't have his wife, then no one can.
Yeah.
If he can't have the world, then no one can.
Yeah.
Right? So he's down to destroy the world because he's going anyway, right? Why does the future want to destroy the past? Well, this is actually one of my favorite parts of the movie. So, in the future, they've experienced climate change, obviously,
Mhm.
and the world is now uninhabitable.
Yeah.
They can't, their species, humanity is slowly dying out, it sounds like,
Yeah.
they're on their last legs. But they have this insane technology, and they're like, okay, how are we going to save ourselves?
Mm.
How about we go back and destroy the past?
Yeah. Which is,
Like, what?
it's so good.
It's so good. I love it.
Yeah.
But also, like, what? But and the protagonist is like, when he finds out this, he's talking to Neil, and he's like, why on earth would they do that? Like, wouldn't that kill
Yeah.
themselves? And Neil's like, well, they're going to die anyway, so they might as well try.
Yeah.
It's just so crazy to think about. These future people, their world, they haven't looked after their world in the past, which is our current day.
Yeah.
And they want to go back and just destroy the world
Yeah.
in the past, hoping that it's going to somehow change their reality.
Mm.
And whether it does or not,
It's crazy to
is
think about as well in relation to our actual world that we're living in here,
yeah,
because we are reaching a point in our world where climate change is the most serious issue, which Leonardo DiCaprio hold entirely. Climate change is huge, and we're reaching a point where we are destroying our world, and it's going to have endless effects starting now.
mm,
So I wonder if there's ever going to be a point like Tenet where the future, because obviously time travel is definitely going to become a thing eventually, if the future people come back and try to end this world here,
it's so
it could
crazy. I mean, it's
happen.
so crazy, but it could be so like it's not completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's crazy,
Mm.
but it's not unfathomable. Like
Mm.
it could be real,
Which is scary.
but it's so insane at the same time.
Yeah.
But no, I just love that. Andrei Sator says at one stage, like the protagonist is like, "Why do you want to do this? Like you're insane. Why does the future want to kill the past, and he says because their oceans rose and their rivers ran dry,
Mm.
and it's such like a it's one line, but it's so good. I love that.
It's kind of like a Thanos sort of villain
Yeah.
motive in a way, where he's really trying to save the world in the best way he knows how. Destroying the world in order to save it. Thanos eliminates half of the universe in order to prevent
Mm,
overpopulation. It's kind of like Andrei Sator, where he's trying to kill the past version, of the
yeah.
world, so the future can live a better one. And understand that if you don't do this, then the world will forever be messed up.
Mm. I think Andrei Sator, like with regards to Thanos, I think Thanos could be considered a hero. He considers himself a hero.
Yeah.
Whereas Sator is just like an insane
Oh,
man who wants to kill
they're
himself.
both psychopaths.
Yeah,
Thanos and
yeah. But
Sator.
like I feel as though Thanos has more reason to him, and like that says a lot considering like Sator is gonna die,
Hmm.
right? And he's so selfish that if he's gonna die, the entire world must end. That's
Oh yeah,
why the future found him.
yeah,
They know what's gonna happen to him. So they're like, this is the perfect man, he's unstable. He lives in the Soviet Union.
yeah,
And as we see in that little flashback, when he's in his lead suit, sort of going about the nuclear explosion,
yeah,
like trying to find some rubble, and he finds this document that says his name, and it's obviously from the future, and then he kills like his colleague.
yeah.
So crazy,
So
but yeah, that
I,
yeah. What were you gonna
I
say?
figured out there. I'm pretty sure Andrei Sator, he planted that plutonium. His future self planted that plutonium, so his younger self would get rich and then grow up to be obviously the Andrei Sator that he is. So yeah,
Yeah,
so he kind of he went back in time to set all the puzzle pieces in place, so he could become what he wanted to be, which is crazy when you think about it. Yeah, really have to think about this film for days on end after you've watched it, just
yeah.
to be like, just to figure it all out. Because like I'm still thinking about it, and I only watched it last night. I'm sure you're still thinking about it, and you watched it,
Mm.
a week ago or something.
Yeah, and then I watched it last night as well.
Yeah,
So crazy. I mean, I think that's a testament to the movie, the fact that you want to think about it.
yeah,
Like we're not thinking about it because we don't understand it. We're thinking about it because we do and we want to know
yeah.
more. Like we want to understand it more.
It's not
And I
given to
think,
you. You need to pay attention.
yeah, yeah. And I think, yeah, it's a brilliant, brilliant storytelling. The fact that you come out of the theater and you want to know more, you're not just like, well, that was a fun experience, off to back home now.
Yeah,
Um, on with my life. You leave and you're like, wow, I want to think about the characters and what's the future and what's the past, and crazy.
yeah,
But yeah, so I really really liked Sator, and I really liked the future. You know, the fact that their oceans rose and their rivers ran dry. I think
mm,
it's fantastic.
yeah,
Um, Nolan's done this before. Obviously, in Interstellar, the whole objective of the mission is to like not necessarily like turn back time. I've sort of forgotten, but I know the premise is the fact that the world is experiencing the effects of climate change
mm,
and it's becoming uninhabitable. So they need to find a new planet
yeah,
to inhabit. So Nolan's done this before. He's obviously passionate about the environment and he knows our situation at the moment. We're destroying the planet that we live on. And,
yeah,
it's important that we all sort of get into line and start to look after our planet because it's the only thing we've got really
yeah,
until we've got another one.
yeah,
We don't have another one at the moment. So I think it's crazy the fact that Nolan he's thinking so far ahead.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, crazy, crazy, crazy.
So
All
where are we
right,
up to? We've talked
so we're sort
about.
of up to we know the motives of the villain.
Yep.
We know the motives of the future, and we know that these nine pieces are they've almost been assembled.
Mm-hmm.
And once they're assembled, and Andrei Sator kills himself, um, the the explosion will be triggered and the whole world will be inverted.
Yeah.
So several things happen here. So Kat has to travel back in time to the place where Sator is most happy with her.
Yeah.
And that's like their holiday in Vietnam. And we haven't really touched on Kat much so far.
Yeah.
But this is sort of her defining scene. Like, this is her role.
For sure.
There's two things going on in the final act, and that's Kat and Sator on this boat in Vietnam in the past. And then there is the protagonist and Neil and like a bunch of other CIA or, secret spies
Yeah.
who are fighting Andrei Sator's army in the future, trying to stop the explosion to end the world, right?
Yeah.
But Kat's objective is to keep Sator alive until they've disabled the bomb.
Yeah. She needs to distract them long enough for Neil essentially
Yeah,
to do his part, to sacrifice himself, and then the protagonist destroys the bomb.
yeah, yeah. So on the boat, so with Kat and Sator, they're sort of, they're chatting. Kat's really trying to, buy everyone some more time because they have 10 minutes to destroy the, the switch,
Yeah.
to prevent the bomb from going off.
Yep.
So that's what Kat's doing. Then we have this massive battle, and what an awesome battle! Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been done a bit better. Like, didn't really know who they were fighting.
Neither did I. Yeah.
I was sort of like, on the second time, I realized that it's Sator's army.
Yeah.
Like, it's people from the future,
Yeah.
essentially. That one Russian brute who is in the final
Yeah.
fight. The one
Yeah.
that kills Neil.
Yeah.
So he's from the future, and all of those other those camo sort of soldiers are from the future,
Yeah.
and they invert back in time to be in this battle.
Yeah.
And then so we have a pincer movement, which means we have half of the army trying to save the world is going through time, and half is going backwards through
Yeah.
time.
So
And
red and
so we have
blue.
the blue and red team.
Yeah. So
Crazy.
yeah. So Nolan kind of he sort of shows us, who is inverted and who is not inverted by kind of throughout the film. He does this throughout the film. He shows that the non-inverted people are red, and that the inverted people are blue. And it's kind of like color theory in a way. If you kind of put these theories in place with these colors, then people will kind of establish that, hey, inverted means blue and non-inverted means red.
Yeah, we even see that in the inverted tunnels. We have the red lighting and then the blue lighting.
Yeah.
Because it is hard to sort of, grasp what's going on, who's inverted and who's not. So we sort of need that visual as to like, oh, okay, that side's inverted, this side's normal.
Yeah.
I've just realized we actually missed one of the biggest action scenes, which is with the fire truck chase.
Yeah.
So there's this big car chase just before. We'll go quickly back to this, and then we'll go back to the final sequence. It's just so cool. So they're trying to steal part of the algorithm from Sator, and they fail the first time because there's this random silver car in the way, right? And they don't know like what the silver car is or why it's there, but it got in the way, and so they lost the algorithm.
Yeah.
And we later find out that the silver car is being driven by the protagonist who's been inverted.
Yeah. It's so good.
Crazy. Love it. Fantastic. You can't actually see, like I was looking in the second time, you can't actually see who's driving the car.
Oh, okay.
Because I was looking, but obviously Sator notices that it's
the protagonist.
The protagonist.
Yeah.
And then he sets his car on fire, and then he freezes because he's inverted. Just crazy.
Yeah.
So he doesn't die because if he wasn't inverted, the car would have exploded,
Yeah.
and then he would have died from burns.
Yeah.
Like, whereas because he's inverted, he just like got really cold,
Yeah.
and he was able to be saved.
Yeah, so
Um,
from the normal perspective, we see the car blow up, but instead of blowing up, it's obviously in reverse, so
mm,
it
so it freezes.
produces cold before it explodes, so it freezes back. Yeah.
So crazy. Um, just before then, when when the protagonist, when he's not inverted, when he climbs onto the fire truck,
Yeah.
as soon as he does that, the music kicks in, and it's so
Yeah.
good. The music is so good,
I love
and
the
I don't
score.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know what's so significant about him being on the fire truck, but as soon as he gets on it, the music
Yeah.
goes, and it's so
Yeah.
good. I love it.
I think it was the
Like
work
that
of
that beat.
Ludwig Göransson, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
who's
yeah.
done The Mandalorian and what else has he done?
So many things. He's done Creed as well,
Creed, he
so
did do that. Yep.
but there's so many things, and I think he's definitely up there with Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
Hans Zimmer was supposed to score this movie, um, but he was working on Dune,
Yeah.
which is we're supposed to get a trailer for that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so Hans Zimmer
But
basically does all of Nolan's sort of scoring in his films, but obviously he was
yeah,
busy for this. And Ludwig Göransson, I mean, if I hadn't known who had done the scoring in this film prior to watching it, I would have thought it was Hans Zimmer's work because
yeah, same.
it's that good.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. I really, really love that, especially like when he climbs on the fire truck and it just goes. I'm like, oh yeah, here we go,
yeah,
baby. Like, I'm down for
yeah,
this. But yeah, so good. Um, and then obviously, like, quickly going through certain dialogue, and we find out things, and then back to the final sequence. Just brilliant,
yeah,
brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. The more simple thing is the Cat and Sator storyline. So we'll talk about that first,
yep,
and then we'll finish on. We might go a bit over time, to be honest,
yeah,
but we we'll finish on talking about that final sequence with Neil and Inverted and the protagonist
yeah. Because we need to
and Silver
clarify
Surfer. You know Silver Surfer's in this movie.
what
Oh,
the
not Silver
actor,
Surfer. Quicksilver.
the actor.
Yeah.
Really?
So the actor from Age of Ultron.
Oh,
I was like, I know that guy. Where's he from?
did not know that.
But he's got like white hair and he's wearing a like latex suit in Age
In
of
Age of
Ultron.
Ultron. Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah. So back on the boat in Vietnam
Yeah,
with Kat and Sator. Sator, like, he's sort of suspicious. You can tell that.
yeah,
And Kat's sort of she's not really selling herself much, to be honest. Like, her objective is to keep him alive,
hmm,
and she also has to make sure that Sator doesn't find out that she's from the future, because obviously her own self exists nearby. Like, at one stage, Sator comes onto the boat and he says, "Oh, I swear I could have seen you on shore."
yeah.
And she's like, "Oh no,
I
I'm
came back.
here.
Yeah,
Can't you tell the difference?
mm.
Like, that was just some other woman. I'm here." And he's like, I swear I saw you. Like,
Yeah,
and then you obviously know from earlier in the film that the actual cat present in that time, is coming on a
yeah,
boat. So you know that, sooner or later, Sator's going to put two and two together, see that there's two cats,
yeah,
and kill himself
yeah,
before to end the world,
yeah,
because she's obviously trying to stop him. And so she's like secretly like putting sunscreen on the floorboards
yeah,
and making it really like slippery.
yeah,
And she's doing it, and Sator's just looking at her like, "What are you doing, woman?"
yeah,
And it's just really weird. But you can tell that Sator's sort of putting it together. He's
yeah.
sort of very
He
suspicious.
he's about to find out, and Kat's trying to do everything in her power to waste this
Yeah.
man's time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's like, "I'll turn over, I'll put some sunscreen on you."
yeah,
And he's like, "What?" She's like, "We're in the shade, love." But anyway, yeah, she does that. Meanwhile, like Neil and the protagonist are trying to save the world, and she's trying to kill as much time as possible. And while she's putting the sunscreen on this man's back, this man that she hates, that she wants to kill,
Yeah.
she just loses the plot.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can't do this. I can't let you think you're going to win.
Yeah.
Pulls a gun on him and then shoots him.
Yeah.
Like,
How would she have known him?
lady, no, she didn't.
Yeah.
Like this lady, she's quite like cool and confident, and
But that's just
you
stupid.
know, she is the emotional heart of the movie, as we've said.
Yeah.
But she's never like emotional in the sense like she's a victim of her own emotions. Like she doesn't do things out of spite. Like she's very calculated.
Yeah.
But in this, she just completely loses the plot.
Yeah.
Like we're dealing with the fate of the entire world, lady, and you can't. Like obviously, you understand why she's angry. Like this man has suppressed her for so long, and she wants to kill him. Sure,
Yeah.
but like this is the fate of the world. Like if you kill this man
Can't
too
just throw
early,
that away.
everyone's gonna die,
Yeah.
including your son. By the way,
Yeah.
she's like, in preparation for this, Neil's like, we're dealing with the end of the world, and she's like, as long as I can save my son. I'm like, well, the world too. Everyone else matters too. Just she's sort of like narrow-minded.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
found, especially on the second rewatch, I was like, "Come on, lady. I know you love your son,
You
but
really don't like this character.
no, like I do like her. I do like her character. I just on the second time watching, I just saw the flaw,
Yeah. Fair enough.
and
Yeah.
there only is one flaw, and like it's only in a few pieces of dialogue too, but she's sort of like obsessed with her son.
Yeah.
And she doesn't really care about the rest of the world. But obviously, you need the rest of the world for your son. So she sort of put two and two together,
Yeah.
and sort of, there's no threat that her son's going to get shot or anything. Her main focus is to save the world because that will save her son. Whereas she's always focused on her son.
Mm.
But so that's like the one negative that I found with the character.
Yeah.
But anyway, she does lose the plot and she does shoot him. So you're like, why have you done this, lady? Like you might have just ended the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, fortunately for the universe, we pan back to the final battle.
Yeah. So the blue team.
The protagonist is going forwards.
Yep.
So they have 10 minutes till the detonation, right? And their task is to fail, correct? And the blue team are going in reverse. So they're starting from the detonation and going backwards. It's so mind what?
And so the blue team comes in within these shipping containers, and that's so the red team doesn't see them and knows what's happening, because it was explained that the weapon that they can have is ignorance. Ignorance is basically their weapon, so if they don't know, it's going to help them. So they come in shipping containers, so they don't know whether they've won or whether they've lost. So they don't find out, so that drastically affect the outcome of the film.
Yeah, that's a theme throughout. If you know how the future goes, you're going to act differently, and that's going to change your future.
Yeah.
I think that's why Pattinson. Well, that is why Pattinson didn't tell the protagonist when he saw the protagonist. Because then he'd be altering with the future, and what's happened has happened. You can only go forward. It's a big theme for Neil's character.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna cry just thinking about it.
Anyways,
so regardless, the red team sort of go blazing through the battlefield. We don't even know where the bad guys are. There's no like tactical.
See them,
Everyone's just running everywhere, shooting at everything. There's no. Like Christopher Nolan's done a war film.
Yeah.
He's done Dunkirk, and it was good.
Yeah.
It was really good. But I feel like this scene could have been so much better in terms of identifying the threat. Because like when I was first watching, I'm like, who's shooting at them? I can't even see them. I don't even. don't know who they
Yeah.
are. But then obviously on the second time, it's, I picked up the fact that they're from the future. I think,
Yeah.
at least I think
I
anyway.
think that sounds right. Yeah.
So they've inverted themselves, time traveled, and then uninverted themselves. But there's no sort of threat. They just run through. It's sort of like in the Rise of Skywalker when
Yeah.
Poe and Finn are just like running through stormtroopers, like just shooting them. Like, where's the
Yeah.
threat?
Well,
Why do we
you
care?
think that the antagonists would have done this before, so they would have known
Mm,
where
yeah,
they would have stood to shoot them, but
mm,
we don't see anyone really getting shot.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think perhaps it was cut. I mean, this is two and a
It's a
half
very
hours,
long
almost
time.
like exactly.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Nolan was like, we have to cap it at 2 hours 30 minutes. Because I mean, Nolan could have made this movie 4 hours. I mean, I would have watched it, but nobody else would have. Not
One
many other people would have.
one thing I do like in this final sequence is when we see a building kind of getting exploded, but at the same time
Mm,
getting reassembled. Incredible! Like, how on earth did they achieve that in camera? I mean,
yeah,
just thinking about it, we see from the blue team's perspective, it's coming down, but no, the blue team's perspective, it's going up, but
yeah.
from the red teams, it's going down. It's like, how on earth did they achieve that?
So
Yeah,
crazy. And you see it like several times. Like they really focus on this building. They're like, look at how weird this is.
yeah,
And it like explodes and then goes back and then
yeah.
crazy. Um, so obviously the whole objective is to stop the detonation or the assembly of the algorithm.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what this big Russian dude is doing. Um, the big Russian dude manages to phone Sator
Mm-hmm.
and tell him what's going
Yeah.
on. So Sator's like, he's on the boat. He answers the phone while before he's dead, of course.
Yeah.
And he's sort of finding out what's going on, and then you know, um, Cat sort of plays dumb for a bit, and he kills him. Then she kills him.
Mm-hmm.
So the protagonist is there. The protagonist is not inverted. The Some other dude, so Silver Surfer. I mean,
Ives.
Quicksilver. Yeah, Ives is his name. Is also there, not inverted as well. And they get stuck in a gate. They can't unlock the gate. They see the Russian dude. They also see a dead, like a corpse, in front of the gate,
Yeah.
and you see the red tag.
Ah.
I didn't like the first time watching this movie. I completely missed that.
Yeah.
I completely had no idea that Neil would die.
Oh, I figured it out, but it took a bit.
I honestly like the second time. I'm like, oh crap! Like Neil dies.
Yeah.
Um, so you see, obviously it's Neil, um, on the ground. The Russian guy goes to shoot the protagonist in the head.
Yeah.
Um, Neil suddenly comes back to life because obviously he's inverted,
Mm-hmm.
and then takes the bullet. And then reverses again. He keeps reversing, unlocks the gate, and then runs out of the tunnel. It's so
It's so
like,
mind blowing and so trippy,
yeah,
but like it's done so well. I can't think of any sort of plot holes that would affect this. I mean,
yeah,
Nolan's basically thought of everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Um, One thing I didn't like though, when Neil does get shot, like in the head, when he does spring back to life, as soon as he does get shot in the head, the movie cuts right back to Cat on the
Yeah.
boat. Um, so I feel like with Neil's death is a big moment, and the camera doesn't really show that it's a big moment. And
Yeah.
I get the fact that you sort of have to subvert expectation. It's just a quick bullet to the head, quickly cut to the next, to Cat and Sator on the boat. But I feel like just give us that extra couple of seconds to digest what just went on in this
Yeah. At
scene.
the same time,
Um,
though, I also kind of understand that, it wasn't, Nolan probably intended for the audience to figure it out, and kind of brushing it off, kind of put it in the past, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Mm.
figure it out yourself, which I
Yeah,
did. Yeah,
it's not significant when it actually happens. It's only significant in the very
I
end
do
when you
think he
find out.
intended for it to be like that. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, so Kat kills Sator, and the protagonist and Neil, along with what's the other guy's name?
Ives.
Yeah, Ives, retrieve the algorithm in time. Then they have this awesome scene, like after they've just saved the world, where the three of them, they have the algorithm,
Yeah,
and then like Ives goes to kill them both,
yeah,
and you're like, oh, have Mexican standoff or something like that
yeah.
here. Um, but then they like distribute it amongst themselves. But then Neil gives it back
At
because
the end,
Neil,
when Ives pulls the gun on them, it's kind of like, hold up, is he a villain? But then you kind of understand,
yeah,
he has to kill them
yeah,
in order for them not to know. So he's really
yeah.
trying to save the world.
I was like, oh, plot twist. Is he working for the
Yeah,
other
but it's not
guy?
really a big plot twist. It's not a plot twist at all. Yeah.
Yeah, nah, it's not really. It's just like the common sense, they're spies.
Yeah.
They're all going to have to die, apart from obviously the protagonist who is going to go on to
Tenet.
become the founder of
Yeah.
Tenet. Um, Neil, obviously, there's two versions of Neil
Yeah.
in this sequence. There's the Neil in the present, and then there's the Neil who is in the
Yeah.
past. Um, So Neil pulls out, like Neil saves the protagonist twice in this one sequence,
Hmm.
and it's different versions of him. But it's not different versions; it's the same version, but he's just gone back in time.
Yeah.
So um, the protagonist is like, "Damn, like someone in there saved us."
Yeah.
And Neil's like, "Oh, was he good with locks?" And the protagonist was like, "Yeah." And then Neil sort of is like, "Okay." And then he gives the algorithm back, and he's like, I have to go.
Yeah.
He has to go invert himself because he knows that he needs to go back in time
Yeah.
to save. It's so,
It's so
it just
trippy.
hit me.
Yeah. That's when I
It,
figured it out. I was like, yeah.
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 So Neil knows that he has to die because he just did, but he hasn't actually died yet because he's still there. But he has to go back and invert himself
Hot.
to be in that moment
So loud.
to then take the bullet.
Sweat.
The scene where Neil finds out that he has to die and the protagonist then finds out that Neil has to die it's so good.
Yeah.
It's emotional.
Yeah.
It's the only scene that makes you really feel something like in your heart. Because obviously the rest is just like sci-fi action,
Yeah.
mind-bending stuff. Most of the time you're just going like, wow,
Yeah.
how did they do
Yeah.
this? And then in this scene, you're really invested in the
For
characters.
sure. Yeah.
And obviously, then Neil is like, "This is the end of a beautiful friendship, my friend." He's like, "We're not even friends yet," and he's like, "Oh, we will be."
Yeah.
He's like, "You recruited me," and then the protagonist is like, "Wait, what?" Like, I'm the founder of Tenet, and I'm going to recruit Neil, and we're going to have a great friendship. But then eventually, he's going to have to go back in time
Neil dies. Yeah.
to do all of this and then die.
It's just sad because you know that the protagonist has to go through, the 20, 30 years with Neil, knowing that
Mm,
he's going to die.
yeah, it's like he's grieving before he's actually lost him.
Yeah.
Like, it's so weird. It's so good
Yeah.
though. Like, he's grieving the loss of his friend, but then Neil's like, "Oh, don't worry, we can have like so many good times. You're gonna love it."
Yeah.
So the protagonist is gonna be like, he's mourned the loss of his friend, but then his friend's gonna show up soon.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It really like is the best part of the movie, I think.
Yeah.
It's what it all builds to, and it's a fantastic finale, in my opinion.
So moving on to the final scene, right, where Neil reveals that the protagonist had recruited him, blah 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 blah
Mm,
blah. We move to London, right, and we see that the protagonist, he hops in a car with Priya, the arms dealer, and
Mm.
some other guy. And obviously they're looking at Kat with her son, right?
Yeah.
And I think Priya says, "Do it before he gets
Yeah.
here," and I think she's implying to do it before the protagonist gets here. And we see that Kat obviously uses the phone. She says the time, she says the
Mm.
place, and she tells
Yeah.
the protagonist
Yeah.
where it is. And she says at the same time, she says it's probably not very important. It's
Yeah.
probably the most important thing because in reality, that
Yeah.
saves the world. You know,
Yeah.
if Priya is dead, obviously Sator can't figure out about inverse technology, and in that sense, he can't,
Yeah.
use the doomsday machine to end the whole world. So, and then obviously Tenet kills Priya, um, and he becomes the founder of Tenet and founds this organization
Mm.
in the future. I just found
Yeah.
that pretty funny how Kat brushes it off as it's not very important, but she
Yeah.
saved the world.
It's very
Yeah,
important. Yeah. Yeah, that happens before, like just before the final scene, he gives her the phone and he says like, document it.
yeah,
Because then as soon as you document things, like you communicate with the future. As soon as you put something in writing
yeah.
and you make a record of something,
Makes it
the
so
future
much
can see
easier.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, the future can see it, and then they can go back and tell their past selves like, oh, this is where they're going to be at this
yeah,
time. So that's why they can't like, plan all their attacks, I don't know, on email or something like that,
yeah,
because Sator will see
yeah,
and he'll go back
yeah,
and change things. Crazy, mind blowing. But yeah, that's the final scene, and the final shot is of Kat walking away with her son,
yeah.
which is something she couldn't do at the start of the movie.
And one thing I do want to touch before we wrap up is I saw a theory that said, I don't know if you've seen this one, that the sun is actually Neil.
Yes, I've seen. Yeah, I heard that.
How mind blowing
Um,
is that? Like, I can definitely see that being a thing.
yeah, I could sort. Yeah, I could see it. I don't think so though. I don't think
Really?
so. No, I mean it is entirely possible actually. If you look at like his
Yeah,
age, and then the fact that he has obviously traveled back at the very
yeah,
start, because he's inverted at the very
yeah,
start. So Neil is a constant throughout this movie. He's hopping all over the place.
yeah,
He knows what's happening. He's just playing dumb most of the time. So actually, I do think that's entirely
yeah.
possible. But I feel
We
like,
haven't learned that much of the child's name, and we haven't
mm,
had a backstory behind it, that it could be entirely possible.
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know. I just feel like Neil he's not emotionally. He doesn't seem like he's emotionally involved. Like he's not. He doesn't really treat Kat with any sort of
yeah,
love.
as if like he
Like,
doesn't know. Yeah,
but maybe he's putting it on.
yeah,
It's going to be one of those things like in Inception, the final scene. It's ambiguous as to whether Leonardo DiCaprio's character is still dreaming or not,
okay,
and it's become a massive debate. Like it's so ambiguous. It's one of the most ambiguous endings in movie history
yeah,
because you don't know whether Leonardo DiCaprio's character has gone back to reality or whether he's still dreaming.
yeah,
Um, and there's certain theories, and I think it's sort of been solved as to he's not dreaming, but I think this could be similar in the respect that everyone's going to be asking questions.
yeah,
But I'm happy to, as a viewer of this movie and as a fan of this movie, I'm happy to just take it as ambiguous and just think, oh, maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
yeah.
You know, I don't think I need an answer from Christopher Nolan. Um,
I wouldn't
but I
either,
think that's so cool.
no.
It is entirely
It's
possible.
also the fact that if Neil had told Kat that he was her son, then it would have also affected you know the present, what was happening. Kat would have
Mm,
figured out if her son had died, or if she would have known if Sator had killed him and her, and she would have
yeah,
put it together. So I think that it is entirely possible that Neil could have kept it secret for the sake of saving the world.
Yeah, it is 100%. And obviously, they are in a British school, so the kid is in a British
And he
school,
is
and
British.
he is
Yeah.
British. Yeah, confirmed. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, entirely possible.
Might have to do a video on it.
Maybe you might have to. So, transitioning to our music segment.
Mhm.
So, for those of you who don't know, every week we take a maximum of 2 or a minimum of 1 track from the official soundtrack of the movie we watched this week. This movie has great music.
Mhm.
It really elevates the action. I really enjoyed the music because it's so
Yeah.
loud, but it's good. So, yeah, loved it. The track going in this week is sort of like the main theme, but it has lyrics from Travis Scott. It's called The Plan.
Yep.
It's got that beat that starts when the protagonist is on the fire truck. It's
Mhm.
so good. I think it's actually reversed too. I
Oh,
think
really?
that's sort of a fact about it. Yeah, I think the music is reversed some of the time.
That's
So
pretty
that's pretty
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
Pretty dope. The music gets an A plus for me. So the plan by Travis Scott is going into the Rewatch playlist. If you would like to visit the playlist or follow the playlist, you can do so by visiting the link in the YouTube description.
Mhm.
What are your final thoughts, and then give us your
Right. Yeah.
tier ranking.
Okay.
I think we already know what the tier ranking is going to be, but just give us an explanation as to why it's
Sure thing.
that tier.
Okay. So going into this film, I didn't really know much about it, and definitely watching it, I enjoyed it 100%. I mean, it's such a long film, and it didn't really feel like that long, so I was definitely immersed in it. Everything from the acting to the scoring to the cinematography to the story, Christopher Nolan just delivers on everything, and he does it all the time. I mean, every single one of his films, it's they're incredible. I mean, the critics just praise it, and everyone else praises it. The audience and everyone. When they see a new Christopher Nolan film coming out, they're like, okay, this is going to be big.
Yeah, they're excited.
Yeah, they're excited, and yeah. So going into this film, I didn't know much about it. I hadn't really watched any trailers. Um, and obviously, when we had the spoiler-free discussion, I didn't really understand, what is this
Yeah,
inversion technology? How do bullets go backwards? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
yeah,
But the movie explains it all. It wraps it up nicely, and it also leaves loose threads that the audience has to decipher for themselves. And Christopher
mm,
Nolan does that a lot. But in terms of a rating, the Dark Knight is my all-time favorite Christopher Nolan film.
hmm
And I would consider it an A plus, but obviously we don't do pluses and minuses. Um, so I would still give this an A because it's incredible. It's an amazing film, but it's the gap between the Dark Knight and this is it's quite big. But it would
yeah.
be
Fair
an
enough.
injustice to put this as a B. So it's definitely
Yeah,
deserves its title as an A.
yeah. I agree. This is a movie that's certainly not made for everyone in the respect that so many people are going to watch this movie and turn it off in the first 30 minutes because they're going to get confused
Hmm.
and they don't want to invest. But for those people who do want to invest and they want to have Christopher Nolan lead them on this this insane adventure, this insane plot, they're going to get the reward for that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I haven't seen The Dark Knight in a while. I think I only have seen it a few times, so maybe I do need to see it again to sort of say that this is the best Christopher Nolan. I can't say that it's the best Christopher Nolan film because I haven't seen some of his other films.
The same as
But
me, yeah.
so far, I've seen. I have seen Interstellar. I have seen Inception recently, actually, and then I have seen obviously Tenet now.
Mhm.
I've seen Batman Begins. Batman Begins is great. Um, this is my favorite Christopher Nolan film,
Wow.
and I believe that everyone who wants to invest enough time into this plot will sort of share that sentiment.
Mhm.
But obviously, Dark Knight is fantastic, and I need to watch that again.
You do.
I'm not saying this is the best Christopher Nolan film, but I think this is my favorite. You know, when I walked out of the cinema the first time seeing this movie, I was just blown away.
Yeah.
And then when I walked out the second time, after understanding everything that needed to be understood,
Mm-hmm.
I was still blown away.
Yeah.
I was still just in awe. So yeah, it's an A tier for me. Fantastic. In terms of like, this is a movie that you can really escape into.
Yes.
You know, movies are about escaping, and they're about, you know, getting out of your life, being transported to a certain world.
Yeah.
And this is a movie that it wants your attention,
Yeah.
and then it holds your attention.
Yeah.
Um, so if you want to escape everything, this is the movie for you.
Yeah. And
Just be prepared to pay attention during those
for
dialogue
sure,
scenes.
yeah. And anyone that, watches our podcast for the sole purpose of deciding whether they should go watch this film, 100% do not miss out on this one. I mean, I would not miss this opportunity to watch it on the big screen, with the surround sound.
Hmm.
You have to watch it in the cinema because it is so good.
It's an
Yeah,
event. Um, in terms of rewatchability too, I'm saying this to you, it deserves a rewatch.
100%.
I feel like, whether you go to the movies now or whether you see it after it's been released, God knows when it's going to actually
I
come out on Blu-ray because of the situation internationally.
Yeah,
But
I really want to go back and rewatch it already, so that's saying something already, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, I was like, as soon as I walked out the first time, I'm like, yeah, I'm coming back.
Yeah.
I won't come back a third time though. I will get the Blu-ray though as soon as it comes out, and I will watch that movie forever.
Yeah.
One of my favorite. It's probably going to become one of my favorite movies of all time.
I don't
I
blame
will
you,
say
yeah.
that. Yeah, I just love it so much.
Right, yeah.
All right, that's all from us today. If you would like to follow us on Instagram, you can do so at the Rewatch Pod. We will be announcing our next episode there shortly. We actually announced it last episode.
We did.
We're doing Revenge of the Sith, right? We're doing Revenge
We
of the
are,
Sith.
we are.
Okay, good. We'll finish off the prequel trilogy then.
Yep.
That's going to be fun. This is where the fun begins.
Indeed.
If you would like to subscribe to the YouTube channel, just search The Rewatch on YouTube, and be sure to check out some of our other videos too. We've uploaded 2 sort of shorter videos as well as the podcast, and there's more to come, it seems.
Yeah.
You're going to be working on some shorter videos too, so make sure to subscribe there.
Yep.
That's all from us today. Bye for now.
See ya.